Okay, hi. Welcome back. My name is Sarah. I'm the designer behind the balance pattern, and today we're going to be doing the sew along for the weekday shirt, my newest pattern, and we're gonna be doing view one, which is spoiler. It's this that we're gonna be doing with the long sleeve and the tulip cuff. So the thing is, I filmed this intro before starting the tutorial a few weeks ago, but it was the kind of day where I couldn't string a sentence together and I felt like it didn't make any sense. Then I got sick, and then I got sick again. If you can hear by my voice, I lost my voice. Unfortunately, I do need to film this now because the shirt is launching this Friday, and I also need to do the voiceover. So you'll have the pleasure to hear this voice during this tutorial. Am I sorry? I don't know. Maybe it's not that bad. But yeah, okay. So we're making view one, which is a long sleeve with the tulip cuff, and it's kind of my favorite. Okay, so first of all, we're gonna talk about the design. So this year, one of my goals was to round out my collection of patterns, and I knew that I wanted to have a shirt pattern because it's a good staple to have. It's a good foundational piece. But the thing is, like, there are certain elements to a classic dress shirt that I don't particularly like to sew, as standing color and the classic wrist. I just find them very hard to look good because they need to look good on both sides, and sometimes that's just not the vibe. So I knew that for my shirt, what I wanted was the look of a classic button up, but it's basically like an introduction to making a shirt. It has the look, but the techniques used along the way, they're a bit more simpler for beginners. And then my goal with all of my patterns is for you to have fun when you're sewing them and not feel like a chore maybe. So the color is like a camp color, so there's no extending color. It's super easy to sew, but I wanted it to give the same look as you wearing your classic shirt open would. And then I wanted this shirt to be oversized boyfriend or model off-duty type of vibe. So the shirt is oversized, the shoulder is dropped, you have a long sleeve, you also have a short sleeve. I want to talk about sizing for just a moment. So this shirt is meant to be oversized, okay? When you pick a size based on your bust measurement. Now, there are finished measurement in the sizing chart. This is extra information. I would not pick a size based off your finished measurement, okay? The reason why is because it's meant to be oversized. It's designed this way. What I mean by that is, let's talk about the shoulder. So when you have a drop shoulder, what happens to your arm side is that as you drop your shoulder more and more, your arm side is going to be less and less curved, okay? So if, for example, you were to pick a size that didn't have as much ease in the bust because you want a more form-fitting fit, because the arm side and the sleeve head are flat, the closer it gets to your body, it's not going to follow the natural curves of your body, and that's going to create a lot of tension here. It's not going to fit properly. So please, when you pick a size based off your bust. I'll just show you from an old pattern book of mine what a drop shoulder looks like, so you're going to be able to understand. If you look at the picture here, what's in white would be your regular armhole. So you see it has a very nice curve. As you drop your shoulder more and more, if you look at the dark gray there, it's almost more straightened out. And then I'll show you the sleeve. So at the top here would be like your regular sleeve, and then as you drop the shoulder, you get to like the darker gray. You lose the sleeve head a bit. It's more horizontal. And I'll just do an aside. The reason why you have that roundness as the sleeve head, and typically you would have between 2 and 4 centimeter of ease, is because when the sleeve is where your shoulder is, that extra ease at the sleeve head is meant to give your sleeve a bit of volume and roundness, just to cup your shoulder well when you're wearing garments. So if the shoulder seam is not where the fullness is, you don't need that ease in the sleeve head, if that makes sense. This design is meant to be oversized. It's meant to be very loose. If that's not your vibe, maybe that's just not the right pattern for you. Okay, let's talk about fabrics. So what's gonna work best for this pattern is, well, it's designed for woven. Let's start there. But it's gonna work really well with linen. This is linen, with cotton, with shirting. You could use a lightweight with this too, like a rayon or viscose. That's gonna give you a very flowy look. If you want something that would be more like a classic oversized button down, use a shirting, use a cotton. That's gonna have more of crisp finish. Yeah, those are my fabric suggestions. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, as always, I use a 1 centimeter seam allowance when I sew, so I adjust my personal pattern in consequence. Doesn't change anything. Same concept, it's just my seams are skinnier. Okay, and yeah, that's it. So let's get into the tutorial and I'll see you later. Okay, bye. All right, so the first thing you want to do when we start is to make sure that the following pieces are interfaced. So the front facings, the collars, and a pair of cuffs. Next, just to do some prep, you want to fold and press the curved edge of the facing 1 centimeter to the wrong side. Then we're gonna sew the bust dart on the front. So you wanna fold your fabrics right sides together so the notches marking the dart are on top of each other. And then you wanna stitch a line from the notch to the marking at the apex of the bust. I always use a chalk for that, but you do what you want. And once the dart is sewn, you wanna press the dart down. Then we're gonna put that aside and start on the color. So the first thing you want to do is put the two pieces of the color right sides together and then sew around the outer edge. Then you want to trim the corners. You want to trim in half one of the seam allowances. Next, what you want to do is just turn the collar right side out and press it well. Next, you want to top stitch the collar, so you want to do a first row of stitching 2 mm from the edge and a second row of stitching 6 mm from the first one. You also can do a single row of stitching here or skip the stitching. It's as you want for this step. And then finally for the collar, just before we set it aside, you just want to base stitch the collar opening with a 6 mm seam allowance and a longer stitch. Then we're gonna take the back piece and create the box pleat at the center. So you want to follow the notches here. So the ones that are on the outside should fold over so that they meet at the notch in the middle that's marking the center back. And then the notches between the outer notches and the center notch, they mark the crease basically. So once that's all folded, you want to press that well, and then we'll use a 6 mm seam allowance with a longer stitch to base stitch the pleat in place. Okay, so for the next steps, we're gonna take our two yokes and we're gonna refer to them as the inner yoke and the outer yoke. So basically what you want to do is sandwich your back piece in between your inner and outer yoke. So outer yoke is facing right sides together with the back piece, and then the inner yoke is right side facing the wrong side of the back piece. Then what you want to do is stitch them together. Next, you're gonna wanna trim one of the seam allowance down, and then you wanna press your yoke upwards. Alright, so the next step is to top stitch that seam, and here if you only did one for the color, or if you did two, or if you skipped it, I would mirror it for this piece. It's just to keep everything coherent for your specific shirt, just so the design looks good once it's all finished. Alright, so then you're gonna stitch the outer yoke, which is the one that you see when you look at the back piece from the right side, and we're gonna stitch that to the front at the shoulder. And for that, you want to make sure that the inner yoke, so that's the opposite yoke, the one that you see from the wrong side of the back piece, you want to make sure that's out of the way. So you're only really sewing one layer of the yoke. By the way, I'm sorry, or I'm not sorry, that you can hear the birds in the background. It is very whimsical, so I'm keeping it. Okay, so next step, basically the yoke that doesn't have anything stitched to it, the inner yoke, we're taking that and we're stitching the front facing to it. And then when you go and press that seam, you press the rest of the seam even if it's not sewn to anything. All right, so then we're jumping into the burrito method. So the first thing you want to do here is take your collar, and then you're going to be working from the right side of your shirt. The underside of the collar is going to be facing the right side of your shirt, and you just want to match your notches there, and you want to base stitch the collar to the shirt with a 6 mm seam allowance and a longer stitch. By the way, for that step, you want the inner yoke and the front facings out of the way. You don't want to sew through them. Next, that's where the burrito and the burrito method comes in. So what you're going to do is roll up the back towards the neckline so that it's out of the way. And you're going to roll it up tight enough so that you can actually put the front facing and inner yoke right sides together with the bodice neckline. And you want to sew around the facing edges and around your neckline. Your collar is going to be sewn in between, and then your back piece is just rolled away, but you don't want to sew through any of that. Okay, so once that's done, we're gonna clip in the seam, especially in the neckline because that's a curved area. Then you want to clip your corners. And next, what you're gonna do is pull on the burrito to get your back piece out. It should be very easy to do that. Shouldn't get stuck or anything. And then once your back is out, you're gonna see your color is gonna be sewn in between all the layers, and it's gonna be a very clean finish around where the neckline is. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to the shoulder. Remember that inner yoke when we press that seam. So we're gonna put that pressed edge where the outer seam is. You just wanna put it so it's laying right over top of it. And then once that's done, what you're gonna do is top stitch that seam so that the yoke is completely enclosed. It's gonna look good from the outside and from the inside. Okay, so we're done for the whole neckline color situation. Now you're just gonna put your front and back pieces right sides together and stitch the side seam. This one is not gonna be hidden, so you're gonna have to either overlock or use a zigzag stitch for this, or if you want, you can do a French seam. But yeah, you just wanna finish that seam once it's sewn. Okay, so for the next step, we're gonna be like prepping the hem. So basically what we wanna do is fold and press the hem 6 mm to the wrong side twice. Then, okay, we wanna do a very clean corner at the center front. So you're gonna unfold the hem at the center front, turn the facing so it's right side together with the bodice, and then sew the width of the facing to the front, right where your second fold crease is. And then once that's done, clip the corner, flip the facing back to the inside, re-roll your hem, and press everything back in place. You should have a very clean corner. Next, and this is very satisfying, we're going to be stitching the hem and the facing all in one go all around the shirt. So you want to start at one of the shoulder points where it meets the yoke, and you want to stitch the facing really close to the edge there, 2 mm from the folded edge. So you want to start from the top of the shoulder, go all the way down to the corner that we just finished. Then you're going to stick your needle in, pivot your shirt, and then stitch all around the hem, pivot at the front corner again, and go all the way up to the opposite facing where it meets the shoulder. Okay, so once that's done, we're gonna do the top stitching at the center front. And really, once again, here the top stitching should match the top stitching on your color. In this tutorial, I did a double top stitching, so that's just what I'm gonna do. Alright, so for the long sleeve, the first thing we want to do is right sides together. We're gonna stitch the cuff together all around the edge except in between the notches. This is gonna leave a gap of 10 centimeter in the middle for turning your cuff inside out. But before we do that, clip the corners, trim one of the seam allowances. Once that's done, turn the cuff right side out, press it so it lays flat, and then do a base stitching where the opening is 6 mm from the edge with a longer stitch. Then once again, here for top stitching, you're gonna want to mirror what you did on the color. So if you didn't do any top stitching, you want to skip that set. If you did only one top stitching, you're gonna do one top stitching here. If you did two like I did, you're gonna want to mirror that here. Then we're gonna do the tulip in the tulip cuff. So you have those markings on the pattern piece, put them on top of each other, top stitch that overlap just so it's all together with a 6 mm seam allowance and a longer stitch. Alright, moving on to the sleeve, we're gonna first start by doing the pleat at the back of the sleeve. So take the notch that's closest to the center of the sleeve, place it over top the notch that's the closest from the edge of the sleeve. The notch in the middle is gonna mark the fold crease. Once that's done, press it well, and then you wanna base stitch it in place using a 6 mm seam allowance and a longer stitch. Next, fold your sleeve so it's right sides together and stitch down the side. Finish that seam, press it towards the back, and then working from the right side of the sleeve, top stitch the seam with a 6 mm seam allowance. I would only skip it if you have no top stitching at all, but otherwise I would just do one line of top stitching here. Alright, next we're gonna pin the cuff to the right side of the sleeve. So your interfaced cuff is gonna be your right side of the cuff. The tulip marking is gonna align with the notch in the middle of the sleeve. Pin them together and then sew them together using a 1.5 seam allowance. Once that's done, you want to reduce your sleeve seam allowance only. So you're not trimming the cuff here, just the sleeve seam allowance. And also at that step, remove all your basting stitches that you did previously. Okay, once that's done, flip the cuff towards the sleeve. So what that's gonna do is hide all the seam allowances and then stitch the cuff to the sleeve 2 mm from the folded edge, and that's gonna encase the seam allowance and do a very clean finish. Alright, so our sleeve is done. The next step is to actually sew it to the bodice, right sides together, then finish that seam and press the seam allowance towards the bodice. We are going to be top stitching that seam allowance 6 mm from the seam. Okay, so the last step, and I'm very sorry I forgot to film this, but you want to do the buttonholes and sew the buttons on your shirt. Follow the markings on the pattern piece, and then it's going to depend on the size of your button, what kind of buttons you're using, and then the machine that you have. But yeah, that's the last step. Okay, I forgot my little mic, but today we're at the studio, we're filming and shooting all the views, all the looks. And this is the final look. As always, if you have any questions regarding the patterns or comments or anything, please always feel free to reach out to me. The email is hello@leperline.com. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed making the pattern, the sew along, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.